And so this is the main reason Roberto has joined us tonight.
You just invite me just to be just color commentary and like bring, offend an entire nation, a country, if you will.
No, I can do that on my own.
Okay.
You've met me.
That's true. Yeah, it's I'm talking to.
So part of the main reason we brought Roberto here is because he was our official man on the street for South by Southwest Japan Night, and Roberto's gonna kind of take the reins a little bit, explain to us what South by Southwest is, explain to us what he saw. Well, not South by Southwest, but Japan Night
we got a long. Like,
because if we explain South by Southwest,
let me go back a few years into the past.
Well, let's see here.
I can
1994.
So, I can explain I can explain South by Southwest. Pretension. But moving on to Japan Night.
It's
pretense.
I'll keep my South by Southwest opinion, but to kind of explain what, for those who have no idea what Japan Nite is, sort of explain. It kicked off actually back in 1996. It's hosted by Audrey of Ben 10 Records. Ben 10 Records, sort of a indie label there in Japan, and pretty much it's sort of a U.S. tour of the craziest bands out of Japan. And I say craziest bands because there have been, over the years, so many weird types of acts. One of the ones I referenced recently now was, I think a couple of years ago, we had a bluegrass band called Saito Johnny. So that already, in and of itself, a Japanese bluegrass group, is already weird. But the fact of the matter is, they then later on that night played a bluegrass cover of Daft Punk's One More Time.
Yes.
And god damn it if that wasn't the highlight of that year.
Yeah.
So Japan Nite's is sort of weird, kind of macro, kind of fun sort of event that if you know about it, you go every year. If you don't know about it and you hear about it and you go that year, you go every year afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to explain. It's mainly because that. But this year we had a couple of, for me it was kind of weird sort of things. Since I saw all the bands both at Japan Night and other kind of events. I won't really go into detail the other events, but I can go at least the acts we had. This is the weirdest year for me because this is actually the first year we had an idol group. It's actually the first idol group to be on a South by Southwest event.
Like a Japan Night.
Star.
Yeah.
Well, just in general, they're the only act ever. It's Star Marie, and there are 3 girl J-pop idol group.
Yeah.
And they're a J-pop idol group. We're talking, what we're talking about earlier about backing tracks and things like that.
Yeah. I would say the first idol group officially was FX last year, but yeah, Japan idol group. Yes.
Let's just say this. It just was. How do I best explain it? God damn it! If it was like, okay, the younger Robert for sure would have been angry at this and J-pop, angry. The current Robert is at least accepting of it.
Mm-hmm.
But god damn it, if they didn't have like backing tracks, like we were talking about earlier about I think you mentioned Brandon, some other artist that was like barely singing over her backing track.
Yeah.
On her microphone. This is Star Marie to like a T. Like you'd hear like hints of them saying vocals, but then you hear the strong backing vocal of like, oh, they've got something else going on there. But it was a funny night. I mean, ultimately, anyone that was in that band got really into it. We did have an older Japanese gentleman doing all the idol dance moves and things like that.
Yeah. That's what they attract the uncle fans in Korea and Japan. The uncle fans are hilarious.
But it was like, okay,
like I said,
we talk about stereotypical.
Yeah.
Like if I say highlights of my night, like that show wouldn't have been as fun without that guy.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, because it would have been like, oh god, but that guy was like he was into it.
Yeah, and when I can say, and it's funny thing, we're talking about idols and backing tracks. The group that I love, that I talk about a lot, that I'm a fan of, just out of pure joy, Tsuneshide, aka Girls' Generation, they lip sync every freaking performance. Like they're just they lip sync every performance, and barely a few of them can sing. And a few of them can sing immensely, and they're amazing. Taeyeon is a fantastic voice. Jessica and Tiffany are fantastic voices. But yeah, they lip sync a lot.
there was, like I said, there was so much. But anyways, let me go over the bands for Japan Night proper one. I already talked about Star Marie, the idol act. We then had Jungles from Red Bacteria Vacuum, sort of this weird punk act. I'm not the biggest fan of Red Bacteria Vacuum. It's hard for me to say that name. But the people love them. And they RBV has been past Japan Nights previously, and so them kind of coming back with their own sort of thing was kind of interesting. The next act was Mayu Wakasaki, which was very weird because, you know, Japan Night always usually has some off-center kind of band. A couple years back, it was Omadaka, kind of with chiptunes, things like that. Prior to that, I mentioned I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show, Chihiro Yamazaki and plus Route 14 band, the Jazz Act. This year we had this sort of weird, kind of very heartfelt, I don't know how to explain it, kind of somber music. It's gorgeous. She has a beautiful singing voice and a beautiful keyboard style, and the music's great. The lyrics are very heartfelt, but it's very, very somber and very, very low key. It's not necessarily high energy kind of rock, but damn it if it wasn't gorgeous, and damn it if it wasn't beautiful.
Yeah.
And so if you kind of want to hear something a bit softer on that side, I definitely recommend.
Yeah, something more you would play at like a cafe, I imagine.
Kind of more the kind of thing it kind of you play, you know, to drift yourself to sleep. Because like the opening stuff, she's playing on a xylophone, like not a xylophone. I forget what the metal xylophone is. Maybe it's metal xylophone. I forget the damn name of it. Instruments per se.
Yeah.
But anyways, she came in. We then had Happy, which is, I think the way that it's described was like, you know, the Who inspired kind of things. It's something weird about the younger generation in Japan, at least the younger indie acts, because this isn't the first time I've had a younger act that reminds me of like, you know, rock from the 70s and things like that. But they definitely played a lot more rocking kind of sound. They definitely had keyboards. It felt very much, your traditional kind of rock music, and they definitely own the crowd. From what I understand, they have as at least at this point now, they haven't really premiered in Japan. They've kind of been in Japan and sort of been on the underground, but they haven't really premiered any full album, and actually made their push to the United States first.
They're also really hard to Google.
Damn it, they are. I'll give you a link to them. I think it's like a band called Happy, or a band Happy on Twitter. Yeah. Let me see.
But I'll look it up when I can. But
it's happyofficial.com is where you go to pull up their site.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of look at their first singles and things like that, and get some of their video and profile there in glorious Japanese, if you can, of course, read it. We then happen to have, like we're talking about how, you know, the young and the old. We literally had a really old group, which I had no idea existed, called Sentimental City Romance. They've actually been playing since 1973.
Oh shit!
Yeah, they've actually, and they're like a southern rock group. Like the last time they came to the United States was like 74 and shit. And you know, they had a very much a if I were related to U.S. bands, like a Creedence Clearwater Revival kind of sound, very much southern rock and roll from that era.
They certainly look like it.
Yeah, they look like it. They looked like awesome. I loved them. They were definitely fun. And they were one of the few bands that actually have, if you know anything about Japanese music, specifically buying Japanese CDs, they actually brought a real Japan CD complete with that. And though I paid $15, if you can kind of look at the screen there, it's kind of hard to read, but it's about $30 in yen. And it comes from Sony Music Direct Japan Inc. So it was kind of a treat for them to bring it. So you could tell that they were, for lack of better words, a real band.
Yeah.
Not saying that none of the other bands were, but it's very rare for anyone to bring a 2-disc set, let alone one from Sony Direct, let alone for $15 that matter. So it's kind of a interesting sort of mix. We then closed out the night with probably the weirdest act to describe, and that's Mother Coat. It's hard to describe them because they're like this electronica kind of stuff. Like it's almost as, you know, to kind of relate to other. It's hard to really pinpoint what genre they are.
Yeah.
But damn it if they weren't awesome. It's very weird. It's very strange. And it may take some people a little bit more time to get into. If they're not used to having kind of an electronic looping kind of action in there with guitars and keyboards and things like that mixed in, and some really heavy post-processing effects every so often. But if you're used to that kind of music and you're kind of used to that sort of industrial sound almost, but not like it's sort of industrial-esque.
Yeah.
You'll dig them. I dug them a lot.
I definitely dig the attaching the pop filter to your guitar rather than to the microphone, which is very interesting.
Strange. It was strange. Japan Nite for me is a crapshoot. It could either be a really good year, really a mediocre year, or a totally awesome year. I tend to go in there blind with certain bands. This year, probably the weirdest part of it was the fact I got to listen to all the bands before Japan Nite premiered. There were two kind of pre-Japan events. What we as Japan Nite people have called the pre-show and the preview show. The first thing was the Meet Japan event, which is supposed to have been something entirely different, but turned into a pre-show for Japan Nite. It had pretty much Happy was there, Star Marie was there. That was when I first saw them. Mother Coat was there, and a couple other bands as well. I think there was a really good punk act. I'm not looking at the names of the bands. It was Genzin, which means like mountain crusher or mountain destroyer or something like that in Japanese, and they're like a hardcore punk sound for sure. After that came the actual preview show proper, which had a lot of Japanese acts. So for me, it was a weird kind of thing in that, but. I guess the highlight for me wasn't actually even a Japan Nite event proper. It was actually last year we had her come on. Chihiro Yamazaki, I mentioned earlier up at the beginning of the show. She was playing a show at the Elephant Room before Japan Nite that I told myself I wasn't going to miss. And goddamn if it wasn't an awesome show. So much so I actually brought my friend Martin Thomas, like I mentioned earlier, up kind of describing what he saw. It was actually the first time seeing the band. I knew he was going to like it. But he really loved it. It was sort of a really, really good jazz act to see. It was a very weird year for me because we had the clash of Star Marie, the very much traditional Japanese pop idol act and following all the kind of tropes you'd imagine for them, mixed in with a lot of this sort of weird indie stuff. And it felt weird because a lot of the, people got into Star Marie for sure, but a lot of the people who didn't get into them, you could tell you could tell that they were a lot like people got way more into the other acts from Japan Nite. I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's definitely I see the variety of and I always love the variety of these showcase shows. Like anytime you can get this many like this one place where lots of bands are going to crowd into one location, it's always cool to kind of see the diversity of those kind of things. What would be some of the highlights of some other highlights of the other variety of shows, like the other random side shows?
Oh God, this is gonna be tough. I mean, because the highlights it's tough because it's hard to say. Oh, the highlights of this. I would say the other highlights for me might have been. The other highlight band for me probably was a Japanese act called Starbeam. They were, I think their tagline is that they're hardcore for the 21st century or something like that. And they're, you can kind of tell if anyone like for me, the joke I always give is that if it's a punk act, I usually latch on them quicker than the other act. But they were this weird kind of like very much punk and hardcore punk at the same time. It was a good kind of blend of music, and you could tell they're very tight. Like it's to explain kind of the highlights for me. A lot of it is pretty much, almost what happens at the events. If I were to say, like the highlight for the Meet Japan event, I would say it was the circle pit that formed during Gozen because there had never really been a pit event at Japan Nite. And it's not to say that we've never had punk bands per se. We've had Lolita 18, was sort of a classic, sort of old school punk band. Mm-hmm. We've had a lot of punk acts before, but never has a pit ever formed. And this was like the first kind of pit I saw at any Japanese event, and damn it, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But other kind of highlights, I would definitely say Happy was a surprise because I didn't necessarily know what they were. I didn't know any of them, but whenever you hear references to the Who thrown in there and things like that, I kind of get a little off-put because it seems like almost marketing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they definitely, they're definitely pretty tight. They definitely were pretty good at their act, and they knew exactly how to kind of control the stage.
Yeah.
And such. A lot of the Japanese bands this past year, I think, I know that they had earlier that week Moment of Silence at the Meet Japan there, the trade show for the whole tragedy that happened a couple years ago, the whole tsunami. But even at Japan Night, because we actually had a kind of a very disturbing thing happen at South by, sort of this weird accident where 2 people were killed by a certain driver. And you can look up all those details on other things. A lot of the Japanese acts had said that they were playing in memory of them, kind of thing. It's sort of everyone says that in general, but some other kind of fun stuff. But overall, it was maybe not the best Japan Night year for sure, but definitely not a disappointing one.
Yeah.
And of course, for those who are like, oh man, I missed it. I can't get to Texas. Japan Night tours around the states. The next kind of screening is coming up. You can actually go to japan-nite.com and see if they're coming around your area. They go through Georgia, Georgia, Illinois, Ohio, Nevada, and Las Vegas. And they end their tour in San Francisco, California. But so they might, if they come near your area, go check them out.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All the bands that played were awesome.
Yeah,
overall.
Yeah. Always go see live music, especially if you can support groups that are making the effort to fly the entire half of the world to come show you what they have to offer. They put forth that effort. Go ahead and see if you can check them out and give them a chance.
Also, make sure to bring cash. A lot of people don't necessarily understand that Japan is still a very, very cash culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they have yet, and I'm not sure if it's for legal reasons or if it's for just that they don't like it so much. They don't really have any of those square card readers. So make sure you bring cash.
I think it's just being abroad. Being abroad, maybe it's easier for them to take cash.
For sure, but yeah, definitely bring cash to buy into the CDs because make sure you bring a good amount, especially if you like all the bands, and be ready to get that because usually you can't find a lot of stuff on iTunes, and it's really hard to import some of the stuff as well.
Yeah. So, and aside from the Japan Night, also we were hoping to hear at least from secondhand if you had any reports on what people said about the Korean stuff because they know they had this is the second year that they had the K-pop night. Yep. They also had a good amount of Korean indie music, fantastic bands like Glenn Check and Love X Stereo, and a few others that y'all should check out because they're fantastic. I love Love X Stereo. I love you, Annie. But you had some reports from people that went to those shows. Of
course I do. I have a friend of mine who I'll probably talk more about on my podcast. I usually have him every year after Japan Night, Jonathan McNamara, writer for Rock Out Japan, or his podcast is Nihongaku Radio. Usually he tends to write about the Japanese side, but ever since the Korean side started coming in, he's been writing about that as well. And he started up a Facebook group of like Texas Asian music fans and kind of keeps everybody. He's one of those few people that keeps me in the loop for who's coming and when they're coming and how like that. So whenever P-Landers E comes on through town, it's usually hear from him. So Jonathan went there and kind of gave me the sort of details about the night itself. It happened at Elysium, the same area or same actual venue that Japan Night happens. In contrast to what Japan Night does, from what I understand, K-pop Night is funded by the Korean government, and it shows. Apparently, they had not only a long line kind of waiting for it, but apparently in between sets, which were like 30-minute breaks, they had music videos playing on TV screens. They really pushed Korean culture in your face there. I've always wanted to go. I had a prior engagement that, and like I said, I'll get more details from Jonathan when I have him on my show. Just because he'll give me kind of the rundown. But from what I understand, it was a big kind of spectacle kind of night, versus Japan Night, sort of less spectacle and more kind of underground kind of feel. Yeah. It's sort of weird to explain that. But the indie event also was really good. I heard all the bands were great. For the indie night, mainly because the tricky part about Japan, about the South by in general. Mm-hmm. You can never go to everything, ever.
Yeah.
You can't. You have to understand that. And I feel bad because I really did want to go. Because even apparently during the P-Landers Z-Fest on Friday, like before Japan Night kicked off, apparently a Taiwanese like rock band was playing.
Yeah.
And there's been a whole slew of things coming on.
Yeah.
And that. But I did hear that the K-pop night, much like last year, did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, the whole Korean government being involved because they very much are helping the not only with some helping out the companies, but they are pretty much relying on Hallyu, the Korean wave, to work their public relations, the South Korea's government, their public relations outside and globally. And they're certainly going to support it.
They support it a lot more than the Japanese government has. I could say that because even the Meet Japan event.
Yeah, because they're not involved with that. Yeah.
Well, no, it was weird because the Meet Japan event was supposed to have been like a combination of music and DJs and like IT companies pitching things, but it just slowly turned into a almost just another show.
Yeah.
And, you could tell it was because there's like free beer and things like that. It was a very weird feel. It wasn't exactly what I expected to be.
Yeah.
And I was kind of disappointed because I kind of wanted that sort of meet and greet kind of event that we haven't gotten in a while.
Yeah.
The Japanese side.
But yeah, it's definitely interesting and I'm looking forward because this time I didn't get to make it out to South by, though I'd been the last couple of weeks, last couple of years. I'd been mostly to Interactive, but I do plan, hopefully, next time to actually make a plan to actually expand my time there, and not just for the chat room stuff, but actually stick around for the music stuff and Japan Night. So,
well, because I think you would probably enjoy, like, K-pop Night would be wasted on me. Like, I would go there saying, oh, okay, those are fun acts and things like that. But you'd go saying, oh, my God, it's these acts. I remember you told me beforehand, you're like, dude, if you can make it, try to go to these acts here because they're playing.
Yeah.
You'd ask me to, and I got a friend of mine to pick up the CDs for Love X Stereo. You were like really, you knew the bands coming down the Korean side. And I think that would have been a blast and a half night for you.
Yeah, and I would say the Korean Indie Night, I think you would have dug really well.
Oh, I probably would have. And like I said, I feel bad that I missed it. I literally had to go to a friend's show that night.
Yeah.
That I couldn't miss.
But yeah,
and if I missed it,
yeah, and I know for sure I would have dug everything about Japan Night. I'm looking forward to checking it out.
It's a fun time had by all, regardless.
Everything except for the South by badge cost.
Yeah.
The thing is that you have to understand about South by. So here's a quick lesson for all those who do want to come to South by but can't afford a badge. This is how it rolls. If you're trying to get into Japan Night or even K-pop Night for that matter, the way it works is line up early. And you'll get in pretty much for those events. Because even though they're big, they're not that big quite yet.
Yeah.
They're just big enough to bring in the crowd to fill up Elysium, and that's about it, really.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get into a bigger act, like if you're like, I want to go see Childish Gambino, that might be a bit difficult. Though I did hear Brant Hughes made it in there safely. It's always a crapshoot with the bigger acts. The smaller acts, though, it's very easy to get into. You just kind of have to know how to do it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can have fun at South by without actually bothering to go to South by.
Oh, you can totally have fun, and that's an entirely different discussion for an entirely different podcast.
Yeah, that's why I've gone the past couple of years. But I look forward to it because I'm going to try to make a plan to go out there next year for Japan Night and for all the Korean stuff. I'm looking forward to that. And I will see you there next year, Roberto. But that's it for Hallyujuku. I think we had another fine episode. We had our first guest, Kaz. Mm-hmm. That's an exciting moment. Let's ask Roberto, what do you got to plug in your life?
Oh God! How about I just hit the main giant website, that being CosmicRadio.tv, my sort of weird federated podcast network thingy. Pretty much where all my content exists now, that being my so-called 8-Bit Life, Jump Point I do with Bryce Castillo on my gaming podcast, Retro Fun Time, and if all goes well, launching tomorrow, Cinematography, a podcast I'm starting to do with Brant Hughes on movies and things like that. So I guess that's the best way to promote everything I do is there. If you want to just sort of follow me personally, you can find me on Twitter at Vincent404, or just head to my kind of general contact page, rviegas.me. There you'll find sort of anything related to me, whether it be my Facebook profile, my Tumblr, things like that.
Yeah, CosmicRadio.tv. Kaz, is the website done? Is the website done?
It's there. There are links on it. I need to finalize some stuff, start getting some content on there, start putting things that belong in better places, add an about page, all that stuff. But if you go there now, it needs more We'll go to the site. It's still a temporary site, so it gives you a rudimentary login stupid thing that Squarespace does for now. But you can get links to Hallyujuku. You can get links to Shooting the Shit with Two Nerdy Black Guys. You can get links to the Twitch stream, which will also be getting a redesign as well. And then there will just be more to come.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you can follow him at King Kaz everywhere on the internet, including About Me. You can follow me at PD Rave. I'm PD Rave everywhere. You can follow the show at Hallyujuku. The show's site is hallyujuku.com. I know that's a hard site to remember, so I created also kpoppodcast.com. Share that with your friends. Share that with everybody. Check out all the episodes on the website. Rebelli.net for this and other shows, including Fanny Pack Wrestling Podcast and Record Breakers. Speaking of Record Breakers, this week is going to be an interesting Record Breakers, because we're going to be talking about Lady Gaga and art pop. So we're going to have pop music this week on Record Breakers.
Drew's mad.
That's interesting.
You'd be surprised.
You bring up.
You'd be surprised.
Make sure. Let me recommend something for you. If you can try to find it, make sure to look at Lady Gaga's South by panel that she had. She had a couple keynotes.
I've seen some highlights.
There's some real. She actually has some really good comments. It's actually funny. I won't go into too much detail there, but I would recommend, if you can, reference that, because it was kind of interesting. Definitely a lot of people went to that keynote. I know Allie did personally, Allie Spagnola.
Yeah,
and she loved it.
Yeah. So that is all over the place. Check us out on iTunes, Stitcher. On YouTube now. You can check out our video. I'm going to start putting up video versions of the podcast. You can see this episode, and you can watch me create a scene in OBS live on there, because I had to do it in the middle of the show while I was talking. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be interesting. But until next time, hasta los huevos. Annyeong. Fighting.